People used to use the word clones to denote basically new genres. First-person shooters used to be Doom clones, action RPGs were Zelda or Diablo clones. But when a game spawned a new genre, it wasn't just that they ripped it off, it's usually that there was some other spin applied to it. But that's not what I'm pointing at here. No, I'm pointing at shameless ripoffs that aren't very good. Starting off with number 10, The Last Hope Dead Zone Survival, which is a ripoff of The Last of Us. So, like I said in the intro, clone games used to not just be explicit ripoffs, they would be kind of riffs on the ideas of another game. And that's how genres like first-person shooters actually came to be. When somebody says Souls-like, they don't mean Souls ripoff, they mean it's that kind of game. But with the advent of digital distribution, clone games have become a lot worse. Steam, PlayStation Network, and the Nintendo eShop are all flooded with these cheap asset flips with nonsensical SEO chasing names. If you're not aware, that's search engine optimization. Let's say Zelda came out and somebody made a cheap asset flip game and called it The Legend of the Kingdom's Tears, for instance. That's an SEO chasing name. Like, they're not even trying. They just slap a name that you could accidentally find in search on a cheap game that looks like a popular game, kinda. Throw in a trailer that doesn't really look like the game, hire somebody to make a semi-professional looking picture for the title, and then rake in the money. There are so many of these things that come out on a literal daily basis, but it's rare that they're as blatant as The Last Hope. Like, look at the logo. They're intentionally mimicking The Last of Us, especially the girl character who's literally just a copy of Ellie. Obviously, The Last Hope one looks cheaper and worse, but that's meant to be Ellie. The funny thing is, that's basically the last thing it has in common with Naughty Dog's survival horror classic. The main guy is the most generic protagonist ever. The game is a kind of half-finished open world thing that, no surprises here, controls terribly and runs like garbage. It's the Switch eShop release that got people to actually pay attention to this game, and it got so much press that Sony was like, you know what? We're pressing the nuke button. The game was pretty quickly taken down, and hilariously, all the trailers that were on YouTube got taken down from copyright strikes. Like, it's that much of a ripoff. It's one of the most terrible cut and paste copycat games among hundreds, if not thousands now, but the lesson here is don't pull these kinds of stunts with rights holders who actually care about their IPs. Sure, all the storefronts could probably care less about what appears on them, but if somebody thinks you're infringing on their ownership, you're gonna get slapped down hard. At number 9, is there a game that's been copied more than Mario Kart? Not just in terms of gameplay, but in style, presentation, all that. You could easily call the entire kart racing genre Mario Kart clones. And you wouldn't be wrong. Refer back to the intro, though. Like Diddy Kong Racing and even Crash Team Racing, these are great games. They have their own little spins on the genre, and they bring something new to it. But the recent glut of literal clones of Mario Kart 8 in the wake of its massive success, they're especially egregious. But, I mean, look at the main menu for Renzo Racer. It's Mario Kart 8. It's just Mario Kart 8. On top of that, there's a deeply embarrassing opening cutscene. Calling that amateur hour would be very kind. This game is terrible from top to bottom. The graphics are ugly in every possible way. Most of the drivers are more creepy than cute. And in all seriousness, sometimes it's busy in that doesn't know how to use color palettes way. And sometimes it's hard to tell what's going on. Oh, but hey, the graphics aren't the only bad thing. The controls are shockingly bad as well. There is no kart racer where trying to drive in a straight line should be difficult. But Renzo Racer, oh, they did it. They really did it. There's so many half-assed kart racers on Switch, but this one somehow managed to win the race to the bottom. And number 8 is Gene Rain, a ripoff of Gears of War. The entire third-person shooter genre has a debt to pay for Gears of War, and Gears of War actually owes a ton to Resident Evil 4. So there's a lot of games that could conceivably be viewed as Gears of War clones. A lot that you could probably say were in the 360 era. But the worst and funniest has got to be Gene Rain, which is this truly unhinged PlayStation 4 pile of crap. It's got just the right combination of a convoluted, overly ambitious story with a totally botched translation and some terrible graphics that almost make it a so bad it's good type playthrough.
cannot hurt you. Bill Freeman is a bastard. He connected us with a mechanic heart. But I can slaughter anyone with you as I want.
But unfortunately, the fun stops when you actually get in control of the game. The movement, it's stiff, unresponsive, and awkward at times. It's not merely janky, it's bad. You play as a Gears of War type guy with fighting, I guess, robots or something, and it just feels terrible at all times. It's seriously, everything about it screams asset flip, where they just bought a bunch of pre-made stuff in the Unity store and snapped it into a rudimentary game environment. But that actually comes off as more effort having been put into this than not. It's terrible. They failed miserably when they made this game. And number 7 is The Ring, Terror's Realm, a ripoff of Resident Evil. There were a lot of Resident Evil clones on the Dreamcast. I don't remember any good ones either, but there was Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, Carrier, Blue Stinger. I mean, those weren't great, but they don't come close to the crowning jewel of crap that is The Ring, Terror's Realm. It's not just a bad Resident Evil knockoff, it's one of the most baffling and inexplicably terrible games ever made. There's so many layers of garbage to dig through for this one. For one, yes, this is an official game based on the Japanese horror film The Ring, which is about a haunted videotape that kills anyone who watches it after 7 days. You'd think that a game based off of The Ring would have something to do with that, right? No, it's about the CDC creating a vaccine for the curse, and then the main character goes into a virtual reality world where they fight gorillas. You know, that old chestnut. It's totally insane. It's terrible. The voice acting is laughable. The controls are so much worse than any Resident Evil game you can think of. And the music is, it's a way too loud loop of intense, weird music at all times while you're wandering around these really boring CDC offices. And when I say offices, I mean offices. You're doing a lot of office work here. The music, it never stops either. Just keeps going. Oh yeah, and for some reason the confirmation sound is this ridiculous splat. You know the one. You've heard it everywhere. And it's funny. It's not for serious things. And stuff like this makes it seem like the game is some kind of intentional joke, but it's not. It's just bad. And number 6 is Bounty Battle, which is a ripoff of Super Smash Bros. There are some pretty decent Smash Bros. Clones, particularly recently, but Bounty Battle is not one of them. Released back in 2020, the game had the kernel of a decent idea, but really failed to do it. So this game drew from the world of indie games to put together a bunch of different characters from a lot of different sources, which would be, let's be serious, a great Super Smash Bros. Clone if it wasn't Bounty Battle. Yes, stacked roster. Characters from Blasphemous, Dead Cells, SteamWorld Dig, Darkest Dungeon, Psychonauts. A good list of big indie game characters. And a couple of nobodies, sure, like Doko Roko or Harry from that famous indie game we've all heard of, The Bug Butcher. Ah yes, The Bug Butcher. I've heard of that. Who could forget about that? So pretty much everything that makes a game like Smash Brothers work isn't here. The attacking is super awkward. Many of the moves are hard to read or have unclear animations, and the whole thing tends to devolve into a brainless slap fight because the hitboxes are messed up and inconsistent. So it's kind of just better to randomly spam attacks than fight strategically. Performance on the Switch is kind of a mess as well, just an all-around poor effort that fails to serve the many great indie characters that show up in it. And number 5 is Waifu Impact, which is a ripoff of Genshin Impact and somehow Fortnite. So it doesn't get a lot more shameless than this. Look at the name. Look at the title card. Come on. I don't know that a lot needs to be said about this piece of junk. It's trying to copy Genshin Impact's title and anime style for a very bad version of Fortnite. Also, big ol' anime boobs, right? That's gonna bring people in. And I'm sure, to some extent it does. Pretending that it doesn't get people's attention is probably silly. If you look at the new releases on Steam any given day, apparently there's a market for this kind of, I don't really care what my game is as long as I put boobs on it type release. But it's rare that they kind of try to rip off two of the most popular games on the planet. It's about as bad as you would possibly expect. Performance is crap. Aiming and movement is terrible. The character models and environments are embarrassingly low quality. And when you're trying to sell your game based on what they're trying to sell their game based on, the character models should be higher quality. Like a lot of the time, legitimately good artists understand, you know what? Sex does kind of sell, doesn't it? I kind of got to incorporate that a little bit into my art if I want it to reach a bigger audience. No shame. But that's not the situation here. This is just a terrible rendition of big-boobed anime girls featured in the worst version of Fortnite. At number 4 is Viking Warrior, a ripoff of Dark Souls. I even mentioned this in the intro. This Souls-like is a pretty saturated genre. Like, everybody and their mother wants to put their own stamp on the genre, but hey, Viking Warrior, where's the stamp? I know I'm using the word asset flip a lot here, and it's easy to dismiss this one as yet another one. And at first glance, that's exactly what's going on here. But it's actually worse. It's not just a copy, it is a copy of a copy. A Xerox of a Xerox.
I felt like a Xerox of a person, you know what I mean?
And it's actually just the developers releasing a previous game that they made called Dark Fantasy Warriors a second time, but with a new first level in an attempt to fool people into thinking it's a new game. The rest of it is the same as the first game, according to the Steam reviews. The game is obviously terrible, look at it, but that's almost besides the point. Of course it sucks, but what makes it worse is that the devs released the game a second time with a different first level to try to trick people. A depressingly common practice, though, among these copycat game mills, but there's still so little oversight on these platforms that many of them just get away with it. And number 3, War Gods Zeus of Child, a ripoff of God of War. I've been raging on PSN, Steam, and the eShop, but the Xbox store isn't a lot better. One of the more hilariously blatant copies appeared exclusively on the Xbox store. It's called War Gods Zeus of Child, which I was under the impression that Zeus could not be used that way as a figure of speech. What does that even mean? Zeus of Child? Did Zeus come from child? Let's say the answer to that question is yes. What does that even mean? I don't know. That is a confusing title. And what's even funnier, you start the game up, title screen has another name, God of Warning. Get it? The game it's naturally pathetic. They just completely stole Kratos' game model from the 2018 reboot, or possibly from Fortnite, I don't know. Either way, it's Kratos, and they're not even trying to hide it. You fight some bargain basement zombies in a cheap-looking coliseum with a few really weightless attacks, and that's about it. That's the whole game. Like, the thing that makes it noteworthy in any way is that they blatantly stole a Kratos model and called it Zeus of Child? I mean, it's look at the footage of this. It looks like he's ice skating. And number 2 is Real Gangster Auto Crime Simulator. I don't even think I have to say it, but it's a ripoff of Grand Theft Auto. I've been complaining about, like, major console storefronts, but they are nothing compared to the dumping grounds that are the Android and iOS stores. On these things, there are as many Grand Theft Auto clones as there are stars in the sky. I've counted, believe me. And every single one that I have tried, whether outside of this video or just to see if it was still like that for this video, oh my god, they are completely unredeemable trash. This game is just one of many. It gets a special mention because of how bad the name is and how it literally just puts Trevor in there to try to make people think it's a Grand Theft Auto game. If you're foolish enough to actually turn it on, expect the usual from this list. Hideous graphics, poor controls, terrible translation, just embarrassing crap all along. But you do get a jetpack in this one, so that's something. Nope. It looks stupid as hell and is basically uncontrollable. And also when you use it, it just reveals how utterly bare bones the quote-unquote city in this game is. There's the bottom of the barrel, there's digging a hole through the bottom of the barrel, and then there's Real Gangster Auto Crime Simulator 2020. Pathetic is not a strong enough word for this thing. It's a terrible GTA clone, but it's so much worse than that. The fact someone can charge money for this is criminal. And finally, at number 1 is Ninja Bread Man. which, hold on. I'm gonna have to explain this one without saying the games up front. So most games try to be clones of good or at very least popular games like Grand Theft Auto, Fortnite. It makes sense to try to copy them even if you have no idea what you're doing or don't care what you're doing. The final result, terrible, sure, but it at least makes sense to try to ride the coattails of another game's success. This game, it's copying from inside the house. The utterly terrible Ninja Breakman wasn't just wholesale copied once or even twice. It's three times. In almost every conceivable way. Ninja Breadman might as well be Anubis 2, which might as well be Mythmaker's Trixie in Toyland, which might as well be Rock and Roll Adventures. Or possibly the other way around. I don't really know. Also, shockingly enough, these were physical games. These jokers somehow managed to sell the same game 4 times at retail prices. So I guess in some ways these are closer to being real games than almost everything else on this list, but they're still terrible in every single way. They are very lame 3D platformers with nothing memorable or interesting about them. Hell, Ninja Breadman has the name factor, but that's literally it. Once you're past that, there's nothing else to talk about. It's not unplayable, but compared to real games, it's not even in the conversation. It's so clearly just like copycat crap of copycat crap of copycat crap of copycat crap. Quick bonus for you: Kabbalah Survival Shadows of Katamai, which is an inexplicable Uncharted clone published by Activision. It's real, and it is as laughably cheap as you'd expect. All those old hunting games could charitably called unambitious. For some reason, they decided to swing big with this. It's story-driven. They managed to get some big names in voice acting, like Laura Bailey and Troy Baker, who are from The Last of Us and Uncharted. It's got the rock climbing, it's got the shooting, cinematic cutscenes, but it's a fraction of the budget. It's far from the worst game ever, but as an attempt at a high-octane Uncharted-style adventure, it really falls flat on its face. If there's any game close to being so bad it's good on this list, it's this one. There was real effort put in, but the story is so gloriously stupid and the gameplay is bad, and it just looks like a glorified PS2 game, despite being on the PS3 and Xbox 360. Yeah, and that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.